This is BBC One with Autumn Entertainment. Here's Noel Edmonds.
Hello, I'm delighted to say that very soon I shall be back on Saturday evenings with another series of the Late Late Breakfast Show. And of course, we'll have the hit squad playing tricks on people that you've nominated, and no doubt they'll be playing the odd trick on me as well. And we've got the Give It a Whirl feature, where a viewer is actually able to do a stunt which proves whether or not there is a brave stuntman inside them waiting to get out.
When making any kind of television today, health and safety is a factor that should be taken with the highest regard. Whether it's drama, comedy, reality, any kind of programme should go to the lengths needed to ensure its cast, crew and entire working team are safe and happy in the roles that they're embodying. However, back in the 1980s, these sorts of measures were a little more relaxed, to say the least. Accidents in television are sadly present throughout most of its history, even up to the modern day. But for the BBC, the UK's leading national broadcaster, two particular incidents spring to mind from the 80s that are both shocking and quite devastating. Let's start right at the end of the decade, 1989. Anthea Turner may be a well-known face on the telly nowadays, but back then she was still at an early point in her career. After getting her start at BBC Radio Stoke, she would soon move into television. Her first major appearances would be via Music Box and the Sky Channel. Starting in 1986, Anthea would present live music programmes, which were rapidly growing in popularity with young audiences, particularly after the explosion of MTV. Her debut on national terrestrial television wouldn't take long to materialise, as she fronted the programme, but first, this. Aimed at children, this show would broadcast in the children's BBC block and gain Anthea a pantheon of young fans. Her success in children's TV continued as she, along with other presenters, were chosen to front a brand new Saturday morning show, Up to You, which debuted in the summer of 1988. In a similar vein to its 30-year peer, Blue Peter, viewers could write into the programmes to request what kind of subjects and topics would be covered. Up to You was popular enough to warrant a second run of episodes, beginning in the summer of 1989. Little did Anthea or anyone know that the momentum of the second series would be dented by a severe accident.
London, England. Each year, the British Armed Forces thrill audiences with their motorcycle skills at the Royal Tournament at Earl's Court.
The Royal Tournament had been a military pageant that had been held annually since all the way back in the 1880s. It was a grand display of the British Armed Forces, and Up to You was on hand to cover parts of the event shortly after its second series began. Anthea Turner was, of course, prominently featured, delivering pieces to camera about the event, including the build-up to what was supposed to be an exciting pyrotechnics display. Anthea was to deliver her piece to camera sat on the back of a truck, from which a motorcycle would burst out of as pyrotechnics went off. Now, you might think, why on earth would you let your main presenter sit anywhere close to where pyros are going to be going off? Allegedly, Anthea was due to give her piece to camera in a different location, with her perching on the truck being a last-minute decision, one that all involved would come to regret. Presumably, the idea was that Anthea would deliver her piece, hop off the truck and get to a safe distance before the pyros would be set off and audiences would see a motorcycle shoot out. You've probably gathered by now that that's not what happened. Here is how the piece actually played out.
And if you want something to happen to you on a...
Imagine being a kid and seeing that happen to your favourite presenter live on air. As this wasn't pre-recorded, crew would have to work carefully to ensure Anthea was alright, whilst maintaining the programme on the air. One of her co-hosts on Up to You was left to deliver a message about Anthea, presumably not knowing the full extent of how the accident had damaged her.
A few minutes ago, you might have just seen something a bit dangerous happen to Anthea. Just here to say she's okay, she's just gone to first aid, and she's going to have a nice hot cup of tea because she's got some shock.
By some miracle, Anthea suffered no long-lasting damage, despite essentially being set on fire. She did suffer burns and temporary hearing loss, but otherwise was able to make a full recovery. Quite rightly, questions began springing up as to why and how this accident came about. It was eventually deduced that a miscommunication between the programme staff and the stunt coordinators was to blame for Anthea being set alight.
The cue for me to start speaking was misconstrued as the cue for the motorbike to jump.
She would sue the BBC successfully, and she was able to continue her career following the incident. She would regularly present Top of the Pops for several years, before going on to be a presenter on Blue Peter. In the 21st century, she's become a regular face on daytime television, and has enjoyed a fruitful career in the industry. But it's important to remember that due to a fatal miscommunication 35 years ago, Anthea Turner's career, and indeed her life, could have come to a fiery and untimely end.
Thank God I sat where I did, because I know that if I had sat literally 3 inches either side, I would have either been scarred for life or I would have been killed outright. Why did I sit there? But thank God I did.
Now, you may think that disaster was bad enough, but a couple of years earlier, in 1986, the BBC would see an accident occur on one of its most popular programmes that resulted in the worst scenario imaginable, and arguably one that had been looming in the background for some time. Enter Noel Edmonds. Stick with me here.
Hello. Hello. Good morning to you. 9:30 on a Saturday morning. It's very nice to be back here on the Swap Shop, and, well, you can see what the time is. In fact, would you like to come and travel through time?
Noel's star really took off in the mid-70s, when he was the main face of the immensely popular Saturday morning children's show, The Multicoloured Swap Shop. Together with regular appearances on Top of the Pops, he quickly became a familiar face and a household name amongst audiences. Despite Swap Shop shutting up for the last time in 1982, Noel wouldn't have to wait long before he could move on to a new project, one that would take him from Saturday mornings to Saturday evenings, and one that would make his star even bigger and brighter.
On the cards for Noel Edmonds and his unsuspecting audience in the television centre in another live Late Breakfast show.
The Late Breakfast show debuted in the autumn of 1982, and would be Noel Edmonds' first real stab at being the star of Saturday nights. Initially, the series struggled to find a footing, but after some format revamps and some high-profile appearances, including ABBA's final performance on TV, the Late Breakfast show would become a ratings smash. One of the most popular segments was Give It a Whirl. Random members of the public would be selected to perform a movie-style stunt. These stunts were indeed something you'd see in a Hollywood blockbuster, but they were also, very often, extremely dangerous. The high stakes were part of the appeal, with even the BBC frequently marketing the segment as boasting some of the most daring feats ever seen on TV.
You don't normally have people chickening out. You are so cruel!
The British public were drawn to such drama, and it seems that the BBC and the Late Breakfast show team were happy to capitalise on it. Across the first few series, however, there had been some problems. One stunt had to be abandoned altogether, which would have involved a member of the public being rescued by helicopter from a chimney just before it was about to be demolished. The health and safety executive had to get directly involved to make sure this stunt didn't happen, ultimately threatening the BBC with legal action. During the show's second series in late 1983, 2 of the stunts resulted in injuries. Barbara Sleeman came away with a broken shoulder after being fired from a cannon, claiming that the BBC don't give a damn, they just want the viewers. Her words may have held true at the time, as another participant, Richard Smith, was involved in a car crash, with the vehicle travelling at 140 miles per hour.
But now we're going to see Rich Smith driving, of all things, a Jensen. I can't believe that, but he's going to be going up the ramp in his Jensen. But it's not Kid Jensen in a Smith, really. I'd rather like to see that. Rich Smith on his first solo flight. I am moving backwards as I talk to you, actually, because I'm a bit of a coward. He's coming up to the ramp now. He's going very, very fast indeed. Very fast. Look.
Well, obviously we'll keep you posted as to exactly what happened with that attempt. It certainly looked remarkably frightening. From the pictures I can see, they're sorting him out. We'll keep you posted as to what happens. A reminder on next week's programme.
Richard's head, neck and back were heavily injured, and a fractured pelvis as the unfortunate cherry on top. From these incidents, Give It a Whirl was constantly called into question from all corners, and yet they would continue to feature as a key part of the Late Breakfast show. However, that was about to change very, very quickly.
And now, before we join Noel Edmonds with his Late Breakfast show...
The autumn of 1986 would see the beginning of the 5th series of the Late Breakfast show. One member of the public who would be taking part in one of the show's stunts was Michael Lush. He wouldn't be fired from a cannon or be placed inside a speeding car, for his stunt would be different and insanely dangerous. The stunt would be called Hang 'em High, and the premise was this. Michael Lush was to be placed in a series of chains and hoisted in a box 120 feet in the air by use of a crane. Lush would engage in escapology to break free of the jacket and then bungee jump from the box as it exploded. Yes, this was the plan. Volunteers would have just 1 week to rehearse their stunts for the Late Late Breakfast Show, a staggeringly short time considering how long experts at such things would practice to make sure they could perform the stunt confidently. The transmission date for Michael's Daredevil stunt was set for Saturday the 15th of November, 1986. 2 days before, on the 13th of November, Michael travelled to the site to engage in a first rehearsal with all of the apparatus. He had 2 pints of beer beforehand to steady his nerves, itself arguably a safety violation, and then was duly hoisted up 120 feet inside the box. He was the only person present inside the small container. After all the other setups were complete, Michael was given the go-ahead to jump. 1 deep breath later, he did so. Immediately as he began to fall, staff on the ground noticed something horrifyingly wrong. The bungee cord Michael was attached to was falling loosely behind him. The clip that was meant to keep his rope connected to the crane had sprang loose. Michael Lush had jumped from the box and fell 120 feet to his death. Impacting the concrete ground, his body sustained multiple injuries. By the time an ambulance had arrived and taken him to hospital, he was pronounced dead. A member of the public, who had taken part in one of the BBC's biggest Saturday night shows, had died. This had been the nightmare scenario people had warned about, and now the nightmare had become a shuddering reality.
This is BBC One. Because of the tragic accident involving Michael Lush while preparing for tonight's edition of the Late Late Breakfast Show, the BBC has decided to cancel this and all further editions of the programme.
The planned edition of the Late Late Breakfast Show for the 15th of November was cancelled, as was the rest of the series, never to return to BBC One. Noel Edmonds had resigned, claiming that he didn't have the heart to carry on. The BBC itself came under heavy scrutiny, and once investigations were launched and new information came to light, it arguably deserved it. It was discovered that there were several failings regarding the stunt. Reportedly, there were no safety officers present on the day of the fatal rehearsal. There was no ambulance on standby in case of an accident. The escapologist who was hired as Michael's trainer had not performed the planned stunt before. He was used to more theatrical affairs. More damning, however, was the apparatus itself. There was no kind of safety net to cushion a fall, if needed. Once up in the air, Michael had no direct way to contact anyone on the ground. Only 1 bungee rope had been attached to Michael Lush as he made that jump. This factor was condemned by the health and safety executive, as well as members from the Dangerous Sports Club, who claimed that a similar stunt they had attempted had them using 3 ropes instead of 1. When demonstrating the kind of carabiner clip that was used, it was shown that it could potentially open from the weight of nothing greater than a bag of sugar. As if to hammer the point, this was demonstrated 20 times. The clip sprang loose on 14 of the attempts. The BBC was in trouble, and they quickly attempted to make amends. They paid Michael Lush's family a sum of £120,000, and the managing director, Bill Cotton, stated that the BBC would produce no further stunts as part of any programme that would expose members of the public to such risk. The corporation would be prosecuted by the health and safety executive, with them citing the multiple failings. It was a grim time for the BBC, one of the darkest in their history. Not the way they wanted to celebrate 50 years of television broadcasting.
Television's most popular programmes, the Late Late Breakfast Show. Now, you all know the tragic, terrible event that led to the ending of the series, and
rightly or wrongly, as is the case so often in the media world, the BBC, and indeed the public, moved on. The corporation carried on operations regardless, and Noel Edmonds would take time away from the screen, resigning from the BBC. He could still be seen by viewers in the quiz show Telly Addicts, which had been pre-recorded before the accident, and it would only be a matter of weeks before he returned to live television. That Christmas Day, just 6 weeks after the tragic event, Noel fronted his live Christmas morning show for the 3rd year running from the top of the Telecom Tower. In 1988, he would return to Saturday nights with a brand new programme, the Noel Edmonds Saturday Roadshow. He would go on to front many more programmes for the BBC, including Noel's House Party, a show that would go on to be one of the most successful Saturday night draws of the 1990s. He would find a new generation of viewers via Channel 4 and the game show Deal or No Deal. Now in his late 70s, he currently resides in New Zealand, running his own radio station.
And the gay parties and all that kind of thing, for which you're well known and famous. Sorry, jolly parties.
I've never been like that at all.
No, come now, no.
Even though it's been nearly 40 years, the impact of Michael Lush's death continues to weigh heavy on the BBC. They veered away from stunts taken up by the public ever since, and the event arguably contributed to greater health and safety measures being implemented and observed by the television industry at large. Accidents still happen. That's sadly an inevitability. But in the case of Michael Lush, things that should have been present weren't. Features that should have worked safely didn't. And ultimately, in the quest to give audiences a thrill-seeking high akin to a Hollywood movie, a member of the public lost their life. We can only hope that there never will be, from the BBC or any other broadcaster, another case like that of Michael Lush. The two examples we've looked at today are chilling, to say the least, but they are far from the only severe incidents to occur in the realm of television. Health and safety may have improved, but all it takes is for one factor to be overlooked, one thing to be slacked on, and the results of which can be fatal. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Bruce Danton, Derek Chambers, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Liam Demain, AJ Mac 200017, Deck, Jen, Traffy, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Ted Elliott, Marnanel Thurman, John Wakefield, Kieran Bolton, 40-something Manchild, Jerry Ralph, John McLeod, Subs Khan, Saint Rocket 9, James Wallace, and Ben, our AMTV staff members.